Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pells.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. Tom, as I understand it, we can't talk about AHA without talking about the sense of interoception. You know, in the last episode that we did on the wisdom of the brain, where we unpacked autonomic healing activation, we talked about how the awareness of these involuntary normalizing sensations is actually called interoception. Before you mentioned this, I'd actually never heard of this. And yet it's an incredibly important part of how AHA works. So could you help us understand more about what interoception is and why it's so important to normalize, why it's so important in normalizing stress and trauma?
Ruth, if I were to ask you what you are seeing, what would you say?
Well, I'm seeing my coffee cup and my computer, microphone.
And me?
And you, yes.
Okay. You can see those because of your sense of sight.
Yeah.
Now, if I would say, what do you feel? What would you say?
I would say I feel warm. I also have Ugg boots on right now, so it's snowing today. So I feel like I can feel the fur in my Ugg boots. And that's a strange one, isn't it, feeling? Because, like, what does that actually mean? Is it, like, physically do I feel or emotionally? Like, what? I'm curious.
Yes. All of that and more. As human beings, we have senses that allow us to be aware not only of the world around us, but the world within us. When I'm first talking with people about what AHA is and how it works, I first talk about homeostasis, and then I talk about interoception. If I ask people to name the human senses, most will usually name 5 in some order that includes seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling. Thank you, Aristotle, who in the 300s BC wrote about 5 human senses, and we've been focusing on those 5 ever since. Aristotle actually put them in a very specific order: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and even argued that there were no other senses than those 5. And he went on to argue that the sense of sight was the greatest of all the 5 senses. Well, those 5 senses are actually the connection that we have to the external world around us. Think about it. Seeing, vision. Smelling, olfaction. Hearing, audition. Tasting, gustation. Touching, somatosensation. All are about sensing the world around us.
Yeah.
What we now know is that there are actually 21, not just 5 human senses.
Wow.
That usually surprises people when I mention it.
Yeah. I mean, that surprised me. I had no idea.
You can find different numbers like 5, 7, 9, 12, 8, up to 21, 22, and I even saw a list of 23. But the generally accepted number in the scientific community of human senses is usually 21. So we also have, not in addition to seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling, a sense of balance, movement, space, time, temperature, and on and on. Those are all human senses. Now, one of those human senses, interoception, is critical to homeostasis because it is all about sensing the world within us, so to speak. Interoception lets us know when homeostasis is disrupted so we can restore its balance. When interoception makes you aware you require water, you have a sense of being thirsty and you drink water in some form. Your brain saying, hello, we're needing water.
Or coffee.
Or coffee in some fashion. Water in some form, yes. When interoception makes you aware that you require food, you experience hunger and you eat. There are a seemingly infinite number of ways your sense of interoception functions, and it's your brain prompting you to take care of us.
So interoception is one of those 21 senses. And it is the one that allows us to be aware of how we are. Is that right?
Yes. Ruth.
Okay.
A moment ago, when I asked you what you were feeling, the reason you even had an answer was because of the sense of interoception. Just as sight is a function of your eyes and the optic nerve, sight is a human sense. So interoception is a human sense too. And not just any human sense. I like to think of interoception not just as one of the 21 senses, but as the one human sense that rules them all, like the one ring in the Lord of the Rings analogy. Mm-hmm. So I love the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and have since I was very young. And there were these 12 rings of power that were made for men and elves and dwarves. And there was one ring that was created that ruled them all. And that's like interoception. And those other rings are our other senses.
Yeah, I love Lord of the Rings too, Tom. So good. So interoception is a sense we might have not knowingly engaged with, probably because we didn't even know it existed. Yep. But actually, it's incredibly important. I think it's crazy that for most people, they wouldn't even know what interoception is. But okay, Tom, let's back up a little bit, because to understand the importance of interoception in AHA and homeostasis, we need to talk about the human nervous system. So, Tom, can you explain that a little bit more?
Interoception is a function of the insular cortex. Insula is island in Latin, and it's this little island piece of the brain in the middle of the skull that is the connection with the enteric nervous system in the gut. The insular cortex allows you to be aware of what you are experiencing in your body. In other words, as Arthur Craig put it in the title of his book on interoception, how do you feel? An interoceptive moment with your neurobiological self. Your awareness of how you feel is the sense of interoception. So the vagus nerve connects the enteric nervous system, which is down in your gut, up through the viscera, the organs in your torso and abdomen, all the way up to the insular cortex, and that's the pathway of interoception. Interoception is your sensory connection to so many things in your internal world. Your emotions, problem solving, decision making, time, health, pain, all sorts of other things, including the awareness that you even exist.
Yeah.
The French philosopher René Descartes, in his Discourse on Method in 1637, said, "Cogito ergo sum." I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Well, my contribution to philosophy would be, I sense that I am. Interoception allows you to sense your health and illness, physical and or mental. Researchers have identified interoception as linked to your awareness of things like pain, stress or calm, anxiety or safety, depression or hope, emotional regulation or dysregulation, consciousness or dissociation or even derealization. The need for intake of food and water, sexual function, problem solving or confusion, decision making or wishing for a do-over, sympathy or empathy. Now, this may sound familiar to many listeners. Have you ever had an awareness of symptoms you were experiencing only to have a professional tell you that there was no explanation for them and no identifiable reason for what you were sensing is wrong? Well, your awareness of those unexplained symptoms is interoception. And the list just goes on and on.
Yeah, I can identify with that. That's happened to me many times, actually. So even the awareness of homeostasis is a function of interoception. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key that allows homeostasis to normalize the impact of stress and trauma is interoception. And that isn't just in your body. We can also sense that in the mind or the spirit. I like to say that homeostasis is the wisdom of the brain. Our awareness of the wisdom of homeostasis is interoception. It's like in homeostasis is the sage healer and interoception allows us to be the disciple learning from the teacher. What I've discovered is that both homeostasis and interoception must happen together for the normalization of stress and trauma to occur. Each interacting with the other is essential to our nature as human beings and allows us to be aware of threats to our well-being and survive. But when we allow homeostasis and interoception to function together, they allow us to thrive.
Wow. Okay, so let me get this right, Tom. I'm taking a moment here, okay?
Yep.
Homeostasis is always happening.
Yeah, unless you're dead, yes.
Okay. So homeostasis, when it's always happening, it's the brain's response to change.
Yes.
But homeostasis, as in normalizing stress and trauma, is different than just homeostasis that's keeping us alive.
Yep.
Okay. And when that happens, it's actually healing us. And for that to happen, it's imperative that we engage with interoception.
Exactly. That is why time does not heal all wounds, because the passing of time does not activate homeostasis. And repeatedly re-experiencing the triggering of flight or fight over time just makes matters worse. So to review briefly a bit from the episode on autonomic healing, picture a human brain.
Yeah.
You probably just formed a mental picture of that wormy-looking mass of brain cells in the skull. And that is certainly a very significant part of the brain, but it's not the most significant part when it comes to dealing with stress.
Yeah.
Hence the reason that psychotherapy will only get you so far. The autonomic nervous system is the part that deals with stress and includes your brainstem, spine, and gut. The part of your brain in your gut is the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has three parts. The part that does the flight or fight response to sensed or perceived threat. That's the sympathetic. The part that recovers from the flight or fight response, that's the parasympathetic. With homeostasis, that's the recovery. And the part that is in your gut, the enteric nervous system, which is all about survive and can be about thrive.
Yeah.
Flight or fight, relax and recover, survive and thrive. The brain can't complete its natural function of homeostasis and that normalizing of stress and trauma to create optimum functioning without our sensory awareness of that taking place through interoception. We consciously have to use that sense.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because consciousness itself is a function of interoception. So the brain tries to restore homeostasis, but it can't without our being present as it is doing it.
Wow.
The impact of stress and trauma is often experienced in a way that disconnects us from our bodies. Think of a pendulum swinging side to side. One extreme is where we are so excruciatingly aware of the feelings associated with stress and trauma, and the other extreme is where we dissociate or derealize from what we are feeling. We don't want to be present.
Yeah.
With homeostasis, we can not only be present, it is essential that we are present with our bodies. Interoception is the human sense that makes that possible.
Wow, I find this so fascinating, Tom. So, interoception is the one sense that allows us to sense all of the other senses in our bodies. Is that correct? Interoception allows us to be present when the enteric nervous system is activated, and that then in turn brings us into homeostasis, where our brain normalizes the impact of stress and trauma. And that feels healing. We sense that healing taking place in our body, and sensing the healing is interoception.
Yep. And because the activation in the enteric nervous system, the gut, functions like a switch, we can and often do take short breaks during the 4 to 6 hour homeostasis process. During the later stages, as the parasympathetic relax, recover, and restore homeostasis function is much more the norm than the sympathetic flight or fight early in the AHA session, I have people assess their sense of the body parts. Now, why it does what I'm about to share, I really don't know, but there seems to be an organizational pattern to the way and the where that stress and trauma are stored in our bodies. Like Bessel van der Kolk put in his book, the body keeps the score. It's where the score is tallied or noted by the brain. The phrase I like to use is the brain also evens the score with homeostasis. So there's an observable pattern to the organization, with the head storing paternal stress, the neck storing stress or trauma from childhood, the hands, arms, and legs storing relational stress like siblings, friends, frenemies, partners, etc., the torso storing general life stress and the stress we cause ourselves, and the feet, thank you, Mom, storing maternal stress.
Wow. Tom, this is just like, it is actually blowing my mind a little bit, because I think for me, one of the biggest revelations for me in my own journey was understanding how the body, the body does keep a store. It does store trauma. But this is like a whole other level of not only does it store, but I think there's just some indication of where it stores trauma. And I guess you find that out just from just doing so much work with so many clients.
Yep, there is an observable correlation between the stress that people have experienced and where they sense it in their bodies.
Wow.
And that's very consistent. So during one session, a client shared what they had been interoceptively aware of during a break from focusing on their body. And this was when homeostasis had been nearly completely restored. Ruth, would you share what that person said?
Sure. They said, I feel weird. It feels good. I think just very different. During this last bit, I was very aware of the weight of my head, how it felt, and the tension in my jaw. I sensed that my body was in homeostasis, but the neck and the head was not and isn't yet. I feel relaxed, tired, but very relaxed. I feel floppy.
And after a few minutes break, that person closed their eyes, focused interoceptively on their body again, activated homeostasis in their gut. Ruth, would you pick up what the person said from there, please?
Sure. It feels like sand blowing in the wind inside my body. I feel the flow. When I focus on my feet, I sense them internally now, not externally like before. They feel cool. It's a nice feeling. I sense them attached to my legs and seeing them as a very brown in colour.
At this point, I had the person recall for a moment any unresolved feelings about the stress in relationship with a mother or a mother figure and activate homeostasis. And the person then shared,
I don't feel the maternal stress now, and I see my feet as pink and sense them internally, and I'm seeing blood vessels and bones. That's so strange.
When the person looked interoceptively, with eyes closed and seeing their legs, hands, and arms, the comment was,
I'm seeing my own blood vessels in my legs, and they feel like they are working well. Looking at my hands, I sense the fingers pulsing, breathing with life. My arms are flowing and free, and I'm strangely seeing bones and tissues.
When I had the person shift their sense of interoception to the torso to assess any remaining general life stress or stress they were causing themselves, they commented,
I sense my torso internally is calm, relaxed and free-flowing light, but there is a green light.
Which is an indication of a lack of homeostasis, since it is not just the body that is being sensed as a body. So I had the person connect with the unresolved general life stress and stress the person was causing themselves and activate homeostasis again. And the person then said after a few minutes,
it's not there. I'm not seeing the green light now. I'm seeing organs and tissues.
Next, we focused on the neck and the person commented,
I sense my neck internally now, the strength and sinew holding up my head.
Which was an indication of the resolution of childhood stress and trauma, which there had been a lot of. Finally, I had the person focus on their head, and the comment was,
I see lots of electricity, energy, blue and red lights.
Which again, because the person was not seeing their body, was an indication of a lack of homeostasis in their relationship with a father or father figure. Had the person connect with that and activate homeostasis, focusing on the head, and the person commented after a moment,
I can't connect with father stress now. It's like I know what happened, but I don't sense a reaction to what happened now.
What we are beginning to understand is that dysfunction in the sense of interoception may be a critically important aspect of many mental health problems. What I've observed is that interoception itself allows us to align with homeostasis in the normalizing of stress and trauma.
You've mentioned, Tom, interoception and just closing your eyes and describing the involuntary activity. And you've had people share their experiences of this as well, haven't you?
At the end of every AHA session, I have people share about their experience of it.
Yeah.
So here are a few examples of what other people have commented after homeostasis was restored. One person said, I can definitely see my body internally. I see the nerves communicating to my brain and my spirit. Picture myself not just flesh and bone, but more than even that, like a network of neurons and tissues, but the communication as well between them. Almost like a supernatural sense of myself.
Wow.
Another person shared this, which was just brilliant. Normally, I feel a lot, and during this process, there were many sensations. There was an energy or a feel that was running through me, and the body naturally responded. For a while, there was almost like a spasmodic twitching, and there were periods of sensations in different parts of the body, like in my head. I'm not sure when that was, but it was on the right side, and there was a prickling in the right armpit. Immediately after that, in the right base of the skull, I could feel a tingling, shivering sensation. It was a lot of twitching, especially that initiated from the lower abdomen, and the energy shot up through my torso. I felt it going through the solar plexus like a surge of energy, and then adjustments with periods of soft gentleness, like floating or like being suspended in a solution with a sense of peace, balance, and harmony, and a sense of expansion. Even now I can really feel that energy. I feel much greater energy that is greater than my physical body. I feel my breathing is much more than the body itself somehow, like a pulsing rhythm.
Wow.
How do I feel? It's not obvious, but I feel more space and flow going all the way up through the torso and up to the crown of my head. With a recall of the stressful events in my life, there's now an indifference and a gentle warmth. This is pretty amazing, especially the vitality and clarity. In the early portion of the session, there was twitching. Now it's just calm, and I don't feel any aching in my body like before.
That's so cool. Let me read when this person says, that's wild. I just felt like I was being rocked back and forth like I was on a boat, but my body wasn't moving. It started forward and back and side to side. It was really cool because I grew up on boats and I find that very calming and peaceful. That's so nice. And they continue. I felt very, very comfortable and felt a lot warmer. And then there were no waves. Now I feel very quiet. I'm feeling very calm, very still, and very, very relaxed. I haven't experienced this in a long time. It's like I'm feeling nothing and feel very zen, like my chi is completely aligned.
And this isn't just about the body, though. As human beings, we aren't just a body. We have a mind and a spirit as well, all of which can and is impacted by stress and trauma. Autonomic Healing Activation is a holistic experience where we can be interoceptively aware of the involuntary homeostasis activity, not only in our bodies, but in our minds and even in our spirits as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I think this episode has been really fascinating on the part that this sense that, the one sense that rules them all plays in autonomic healing activation. And as we continue with this podcast, we will be looking at how AHA, I know you've mentioned this before, but how it can be applied to the mind, which is what you call as AHA problem solving, and also the spirit, AHA spiritual formation, and how you discovered this whole thing in the first place.
You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.